It's a feisty Friday on Inside Coverage. Frank Schwab, Charles Robinson. I'm Jason Fitz. And look, I was looking at Cowboys beef, and I was thinking of you two. Look, the Cowboys got beef all of a sudden, and I thought, what better way to bring it than here? And for anyone that hasn't seen, this all comes back to some shade talking that's going on between Lawrence, who signs with the Seahawks, and Parsons, who's obviously still with the Cowboys. And, DeMarcus comes out and says, Dallas is my home, but I'll never win a Super Bowl there. Micah comes out and says this is just jealous talk, and now they're going back and forth, and it's getting swarmy. Here's my question, though, as two experts of beef, right? And a little bit of side-eye here. C-Rob, is this just somebody gets paid and they feel like trashing the place that they're leaving, or is there something real to this sort of beef to you?
I think there's something real. I mean, look, DeMarcus Lawrence, it's not like it was a short stint in Dallas. We're talking about like 11 years and a ton of money. And at times, definitely having affection for ownership between DeMarcus Lawrence and the Jones family. And, but there were definitely better times, I think, between Lawrence and ownership and the surrounding roster. Remember, Lawrence missed most of last season with foot injury. And I think, to me, when I read this, I thought, yeah, okay, this makes sense. Like this feels like one of those beefs that was bubbling under the surface at the very least in 2024 and probably the last couple of seasons. And I think part of that has to do with Micah Parsons looking at himself and seeing himself as the cornerstone of that defense, seeing himself as the leader of that defense, and now dealing with a player in DeMarcus Lawrence who also felt that same way the last couple of years, even missing the games in 2024. I think DeMarcus Lawrence still would have described himself as the leader of that defense and a leader in that locker room, a cornerstone of that franchise. But I think it's one thing when you essentially have Micah Parsons say, you're just jealous, you're out of here, this is some clown. It's another thing when Lawrence turns around and says, basically, hey, spend less time on social media and more time winning in our building.
Can I please read this tweet? Because, it was like,
this is great. It's a good tweet.
We're getting going, like a couple back and forth, whatever. And this was just the mic drop. DeMarcus Lawrence, calling me a clown won't change the fact that I told the truth. Maybe if you spent less time tweeting and more time winning, I wouldn't have left. Devil emoji. That is okay. Oh my goodness. You just literally threw the Molotov cocktail and just left the place. Like that was, oh my God.
To be completely fair here though, had the Cowboys come with the money, then DeMarcus Lawrence comes and he stays,
of
right?
Course,
like it's not like, oh, I left because we weren't winning, and that's why I'm in Seattle now. No, he left because he got paid by Seattle, and the Cowboys are doing the Cowboys thing. Jerry's going and he's adding pieces that would have been solid additions a couple of years ago on the roster. But right now, instead, he's watching, Jordan Lewis goes out the door. That's a really good slot corner that hurts them. Lawrence, I think from the locker room standpoint, going out the door hurts them. You could argue, though, that the production had been dipping the last couple of years. It's been a long time since he's been a double-digit sack guy in this league. Doesn't mean he's not still a good defensive player, but not really top-end dominant type of defensive player that he was in the prime of his career. But for Lawrence to bring up social media, which Micah Parsons has a podcast that has a very solid following. He says things on that podcast that make news, and clearly that's an agitation. There's no doubt in my mind. I was going to ask you,
is that real or is that just guy like throwing out something? Because if he's agitated by it, guys who are still in the locker room are probably agitated by it.
He did a podcast where he listed the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL and he didn't list his own, right? Like that's going to make news, even if he doesn't think, even if you don't think Tack is a top 10 quarterback, you still put him in that list somewhere if you're worried at all about the locker room.
I think some of this is generational divide, right? And I think you do see it in the NFL now where you have players who it's not like they didn't come into the league with social media in existence. They did, but they also came in the league at a time. If you're in your early to mid 30s in the NFL right now, you entered the league at a time when teams frowned upon social media and said, like, hey, look, when you're in the building, be in the building. That's off-season stuff. Like, if you're going to be online, you're going to be doing stuff on social platforms. That's for March. That's for February. That's for the early summer. But when the season's going on, you're in our building. So none of this other bullshit. And that's different now. You have players who do podcasts. By
the way, this is a Shedeur Sanders thing too. We're going to deal with this with Shedeur Sanders for a while. Shedeur. But yes, go ahead.
Absolutely. But yeah, this is so I think there's some generational divide where you have younger players who are like, yeah, we do stuff in season now. We all do. We all have the opportunity. We can all build these brands on Tuesdays when we're supposed to be off during the course of the week. So I think there's some of that, but also at the same time, I truly believe, as Fitz, said, sometimes he comes out, Micah Parsons, on his podcast, and he says things that are that play in Dallas and become storylines in Dallas. And I would say that I don't think DeMarcus Lawrence is the only person who thinks that. And I would also say DeMarcus Lawrence probably isn't the only person inside the Dallas franchise that looks at Micah Parsons and thinks, okay, you fashion yourself as the guy, the leader, the cornerstone. You're the heartbeat of this defense. Maybe you want to be that, but you ain't that yet. Like, you have to show up in the playoffs and have big games and be someone who helps to be a reason why we're winning games in the postseason in order to look at yourself and say, well, I'm that dude. I would say this is a simmering beef that's been going on inside that franchise for a couple of years, and it has not helped that the Cowboys clearly right now, from a money standpoint, are positioning themselves to try to sign Micah Parsons to that, $40 million plus per season deal and retain him. And the cost of that is losing a Jordan Lewis, which I think actually is an equal or bigger part of this offseason than losing a DeMarcus Lawrence, because Jordan Lewis was a very, very good slot corner that will hurt them quite a bit.
Okay, DeMarcus Lawrence is a heck of a player, but like you said, like you're getting to the age where the production's declined. Jordan Lewis is in his prime. See, and to me, like, this whole beef, like, who cares what a guy from the Seahawks now and a guy from the Cowboys think about each other? It's fun, whatever. My only question, like, going forward is not just Tank Lawrence versus Micah Parsons, is Tank Lawrence saying what other Cowboys in the locker room can't say? Because Micah Parsons is the big name there and all that kind of stuff. And does Micah Parsons have to take a look in the mirror and say, maybe it's right? I don't know. Like, that's a fascinating part to me. Not that basically an ex-employee is ripping his former bosses and former coworker, but what is the thought process in the Cowboys locker room about Micah Parsons right now? And was it Tank Lawrence just taking a shot at somebody for whatever reason? Or was he saying what everybody else can't say? It was still in that locker room.
And I think this, guys, is why, look, I was watching ESPN this morning, and the conversation they were having with Chris Candy is, would any of this be a reason that you would consider trading Parsons? And, like, I understand the greatness of the player far outweighs any of the drama. We all know that. I mean, this is the NFL. You can kill somebody and stay on the field if you're good enough at what you do. Like, we know how the NFL works. At some point, is this a sign of a greater issue with Parsons that somebody should be concerned about, or do the Cowboys not give a damn about any of this and simply reward a player that is absolutely epic on the field?
Well, I mean, look, you're going to be paying him, again, the threshold now for some, non-quarterback contracts. CeeDee Lamb, is that upper echelon of wide receivers. It's a very expensive deal to carry. Dak Prescott, the very top of the quarterback heap, very difficult contract to carry moving forward. And then Micah, is going to make $40 million plus. It's going to happen, whether it's in Dallas or elsewhere.
Yep.
Micah's going to be a $40 million plus player.
Oh, Charles, when him and his agent saw that Myles Garrett deal, I'm sure that the Cowboys front office went, because now that's the starting point. Now that, hey, I want Myles Garrett money.
He commented on that in social media, right? He said, LOL, WTF, yo, like it was some kind of, he had a reaction to that deal. And so, to me, part of this too is just sitting there and staring at the salary dynamics of it, and knowing that, he does do other stuff off the field. Yeah, there's more than just showing up and being a defensive player of the year candidate. Now is he worth it? Yeah, he is. I mean, he's a very dynamic defensive player. He's a defensive player of the year candidate every year. If he plays a 17-game season. There's no way he's not in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. There's no way he's not in the first team All-Pro conversation. But if you're Cowboys fans right now, maybe the bigger part of this is the fact that a longtime leader in your locker room left and felt comfortable saying the quiet part out loud that ownership does not want anybody saying, I can't win a Super Bowl in Dallas. Whether it's bullshit or not, whether it's, hey, I got paid by Seattle and that's why I left. Maybe I really didn't leave because I can't win a Super Bowl. But just the fact that he added to that narrative, I am an ex-player, ex-leader in your locker room, long-time staple of your defense. And I just said, that is my home. I cannot win a Super Bowl there. If you're ownership, you have to wince because you're like, that is very, very troubling statement. And I can tell you that absolutely resonated inside that franchise. There were some people who winced when they heard him say that.
And that wasn't said in anger. Like the whole social media thing might have just been said to like get back on somebody on social media. That was part of an interview and he said it like it was just kind of like a matter of fact kind of statement of, hey, I just couldn't win a Super Bowl there. And that's the problem. That wasn't said, I don't think out of spite or anything like that. I really think that he was just telling the truth that he doesn't think he can win a Super Bowl.
But he was comfortable saying it, Frank. The fact that he was even comfortable saying when he didn't have to. He didn't have to. He could have made, it was unprompted. He could have made that interview. Unprompted, yeah. He 100% could have made that interview about, hey, I'm coming to Seattle. I'm excited about Mike McDonald. I'm excited about this. Instead, he made part of it about Dallas and a very, very troubling part of it about Dallas. It wasn't just like, hey, I don't like the direction or there's been some frustrations there. He invoked the Super Bowl when he didn't have to. And that's where you get ownership going, oh my God, like please, not this guy of all guys going out.
Of all guys. A possible Ring of Fame guy at some point, right? Like that's how much of an impact he had on the franchise.
That's the part that's staggering to me. Like he's going to be back in that stadium in a few years. You would think if he handles everything really well, he's back in that stadium, his numbers going up. He's got that status. Now all he's doing is just poking the belly of the beast. The one thing I think we all know is that there's too much pride in Jerry Jones to actually change anything. Like this
poking the belly of the beast, poking the belly of Winnie the Pooh. What beast? What are we talking about here? Okay, the beast. The Cowboys. No, we can't. This is bullshit. We got to stop with this. The Cowboys are not a beast.
No, they're not. And that's the
they've
thing.
got a bunch of money.
But Jerry's somebody I wouldn't want to
players.
screw with Jerry. Like Jerry can make sure things are easy for me in the next chapter of my life, right?
I mean, Jerry can say, "Hey, I'm not putting you in the Ring of Honor." DeMarcus Lawrence has got money. He's paid. He doesn't need Jerry to be fine the rest of his life. He'll be okay. All right.
The thing is, and I think we'd all agree on this. What he said wasn't wrong. Can they win a Super Bowl? Like we saw, like their offseason again has just been, oh, we're going to find every failed former first-round pick and try to turn them around. Right. That never works out. That is a dumb strategy. They're losing guys as a way to pay Micah Parsons, which, once again, how many times do we have to say this? The Cowboys dragged their feet on getting a deal done, and it cost them money because it went from, Max Crosby making $35.5 million to Myles Garrett making $40 million. Well, you could have paid Micah Parsons probably $36 million a year ago, and he'd have been very happy. Now it's going to cost you $5 million more per year. That's what the Cowboys do, and they're losing players as a result of this. They can't address a lot of their needs. They're going on signing Javonte Williams. Like, come on, like what? Like none of these players are impact players. They're losing good players. They haven't added anybody of note in free agency in a while. Like this team is not going to win a Super Bowl. Like they're so far behind the Eagles. They're far behind the Commanders, I think now. Like it's just that window's, I think, kind of closed. I hate to say that about anybody because things can change quickly. But yeah, DeMarcus Lawrence wasn't wrong. Like he probably wasn't winning a Super Bowl in Dallas, and Dak Prescott's probably not winning a Super Bowl in Dallas. Micah Parsons probably not winning a Super Bowl in Dallas because they keep falling further and further behind the rest of the NFC East.
My only thing I'd say is that Lawrence could make that argument a little bit easier if he had signed with, I don't know, the Chiefs or the Eagles or even the Commanders. He signed with the Seahawks. Let's not pretend he went somewhere where he's about to win the Super Bowl. Sorry to Stone, producer extraordinaire, that's also a Seahawks fan. Okay, we got winners and losers to get into. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll figure out who's won, who's lost so far through free agency. Oh, free agency is about a week old, so let's get into some winners and losers. Just a quick thought here, though, guys. I was thinking about this. You mentioned earlier Parsons going to social media when he saw the Myles Garrett stuff. This is just a weirdism about being a professional athlete. Imagine if in every single industry, the minute a new person was brought into your company, you immediately found out how much they make. Like, that is just such a weird portion of, imagine if you worked for, I don't know, a stock brokerage firm, and a new broker's brought in, and the first thing they're like, well, we gave him X amount of dollars to come in. Like, everybody be asking for a raise. If you worked at a car dealership, a new salesman came in, by the way, he makes X amount of dollars. Like, what's happening to the NFL would happen to every single industry if we simply publicized exactly how much people made the minute that they took their deal. It is a weirdism.
And
about,
also added at the end, deal negotiated by. I want to see that. I want to see that.
Oh, God.
With us.
That would be amazing if it was for like a widget salesman. It's like, or widget manufacturer. It's like, deal negotiated by his Uncle Steve. Okay. So let's get into some of the winners and losers across the board. Frank, you've got Caleb Williams as a winner. I think we can all imagine why, but tell us why.
Yes, but with a caveat at the end. I mean, the Bears have done everything they can at this point. They got him skill position guys last year. This year, they said, we're just investing in the line. We're going to get Joe Tooney. We're going to get Jonah Jackson. We're going to get Drew Dahlman, who's a very, very good center. The interior of the line is set. He's got the play caller now, the best play caller in the NFL, perhaps, or one of, let's say, a handful of guys. I'm not putting him ahead of Andy Reid yet, but Ben Johnson knows what he's doing on offense. The only drawback for Caleb Williams right now, there's no excuses left. There's none. Like, if he comes out in year 2 and he's making the same mistakes he made year 1, and they don't make the playoffs or even come close, and they're not winning games, at some point, you just have to say, this is on you, Caleb. We've set the table for you, dude. Like, here it is. You got to do it. I think he will. I think he's going to have a big year. I think the Bears are going to be really good. But that's the problem for Caleb Williams. There's a lot of pressure on him this year. And I don't think there's any, you can't be like, oh, it's his second year. Let's wait till his third year. No, they've invested in every single way you can invest in bringing along a young quarterback. And now it's on him. But the good news for him, unlike CJ Stroud, who we'll talk about, is they've actually tried to help him. Like, they've actually said, let's get this done. Let's figure out a way to make Caleb Williams great.
But Frank, the design is to take away the excuses, right? Like, that's the point.
Absolutely.
Is to remove the problems. And
we're going to find out. We're going to find out if Caleb Williams is a baller or not this year.
Is Caleb a problem? That's what you are trying to resolve here, is to take everything else away that has reflected negatively on his development. And absolutely rebuilding the interior of the offensive line, I think, is a huge plus. I think I would say that not just Caleb Williams is a winner, but the Bears organization overall and the fan base are winners, because you see Ben Johnson come in. He's interacted and been aggressive in a way publicly that I wasn't sure he was entirely capable of. Like, listening to him talk and lead, and I'm like, oh, okay. He was. I undersold this. I wasn't 100% sure how he would project being aggressive about success in that organization. And then I thought, all right, well, let's see. Let's see if they actually make the moves that they need to make. It's one thing to say words. It's one thing to say, I like beating the Green Bay Packers. These are all popular statements, but show us how you're going to do that in Chicago. And then they followed up, and in a way that was very, very decisive. And they did it in different fashions too. It wasn't like they just went out and opened the wallet in free agency. No, they traded, for Tooney. They traded for Williams. Like, then you open the wallet for the center position. So there's connectivity between putting it out there, this is what we're about, and then showing, here's how we're going to go about doing our business. I think if you're Bears fans, you have to be really excited about that. And frankly, if you're Bears fans, you should be excited now that you've swept away things that could have gotten in Caleb Williams' way. And now you're really going to get, and again, I don't want to bang on him too much because his rookie season wasn't atrocious. Sometimes we talk about him. Sometimes we talk about him like it was just this bad, it's the Titanic hitting the iceberg and sinking in 3 hours. That's not what happened
for him that Jaden Daniels was in the league too.
Did.
I mean, Jaden Daniels overshadowed him. Yeah.
This right here will show what he can be as a player, the direction he takes from Ben Johnson, his patience, his ability to stay on script. Now we can, I think, get a real, true, honest assessment. I don't think we should look at him in year 2 and go, okay, well, this is when you become an all-pro level player. I think that's unfair. But see a big stride forward, to see the Bears get better in the win-loss column, this has been an
I want to be
offseason
sitting
that
here
I
a
think
year
has
from
been
now
good.
saying Caleb Williams is a future star in this league. Whether he reaches that in his second year or not, we'll see. I don't know. But I don't want to be sitting here a year from now with you two guys saying, I don't know, Caleb is kind of okay. What? No, it's got to show this year. And maybe, like you said, maybe not all pro or anything like that, but to the point where there's just no question. Yeah, Caleb's coming. He's going to be really, really good. By the way, the Bears as a whole this way too, they've raised a lot of offseason championship banners lately. Like, this isn't the first time we've been like, oh my God, the Bears, look what they did this offseason. And then they go out and they win 5 games. Like, this is on the Bears too as an organization. You got to do something. You can't just, if you go 8-9 this year, you deserve to get clowned a little bit, because every single year recently you're winning the offseason championship. And that just has not produced any results.
I mean, a year ago, I thought they were going to be a playoff team. And even though I hated the Eberflus thing, and we all talked about that a lot, like I was wrong about that. But Frank, a couple of weeks ago when we did an episode where we kind of laid out the yeah buts for every team, Bears fans don't want to hear any of this. Ben Johnson, Caleb Williams, perfect combo. The only thing I'd say is that in the offseason, we have to apply universal benefit of the doubt across the board. So if I'm going to presume that everything Chicago has done is going to work out perfectly, then I think it's only fair to also presume that everything Minnesota's done is going to work out perfectly, and everything that Green Bay has done is going to work out, so on and so forth. And if you do that math, well, it's pretty easy for me to say the Lions aren't going to have the injury issues next year that they had last year, because that was catastrophic. It's pretty easy for me to say the Vikings have made some big moves, and if I'm going to give universal benefit of the doubt, they're sure JJ can turn out and be a rock star, okay? If I apply that universal benefit all the way across the board, are the Bears better? Yes. Are the Bears the third best team in their own division? Probably. Like I'm trying to be more measured this way with Chicago.
Yeah, that division's a beast. Like, that division is really, really good. And we'll get to that later too. But but you just look, we know there's nuance to all this. There's a difference between being kind of a mediocre 9-8 and missing the playoffs, or being like, well, you know what? You played in the toughest division we've seen in NFL for a really, really long time. So I just want to see progress from the Bears and not just us celebrating them in March, because we've done it a lot.
Look, we can get over our skis on every edition this, in the offseason. We get excited about all these, which is fine. It's the offseason. It's a good time to be excited. The draft's a good time to be excited. Training camp's a good time to be excited. I think the marker here is there effort? Is there change? That's what I want to see. Fair. Is there effort and change, and did you get better? There's been effort by the Chicago Bears. There's been change by the Chicago Bears, and you can argue the Chicago Bears got better on paper. You can't ask for more in an offseason, right? So let's just...
Really fair.
We're not giving them their flowers right now. We're not... Yeah, you're right. There's been some hanging of some offseason banners and everything. But we've seen the downside. We've seen other teams where we're like, that definitely got worse. Things are not going well. We're not. By the way, try doing
free agency grades. Everybody thinks their team deserves an A. Like Philadelphia Eagles fans, like, how dare you? Like, guys, you didn't. Come on, like, you're good. You're not going anywhere. But you lost Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. What am I supposed to do? Giving an A? Like, what? But try doing free agency grades. That's always fun. That's always a lot of fun.
To your point, Frank, when you talk about 9-8. Like, there's an ism in country music. Like, there's 2 times in your life that you're going to play the Podunk County Fair, on the way up and on the way down in your career. And on the way up, you're so excited because you're like, heck yeah, man, we got a gig. We're playing this fair. That's awesome. Then you have like 10 great years, and all of a sudden on the downside of your career, you don't feel so good about playing that same county fair. You're like, we're back here. Everything's gone to hell, right? The 9-8 is the same way. If you're rising, if your team sucks and you get to 9-8, you're like, man, next year we are going to kill it. We are tackling the world. If your team has these huge expectations or has been really good and they hit 9-8, you're like, it's a disaster. Everything's falling apart. Like,
let
same
the Lions
record.
Go 9-8 next year. Yeah.
Oh my God! Like, the world, it'll be a dumpster fire. It's the Elmo thing.
You'd be the Steelers and just play the same fair every year.
I got buddies who have done that. And the funny thing is, my buddies that have done that have found peace in it, are so happy. I don't know. Maybe that's the real lesson.
Happy playing the Podunk County State Fair every year or whatever.
Paducah, Kentucky every year. Okay. I'm pretty sure at this point that Max Crosby could buy Paducah, Kentucky. Okay. So winners, edge rushers getting paid. And like, look, I think we all called it on the show, but C-Rob, the next time a player comes out on just a sucky team that lives in a sea of suck, that's drowning in an eternal just ocean of bad, and sits there and says, I want out, let's just remember that what he really wants is enough money to be motivated to stay, right? Because Crosby gets historic money, and then a couple of days later, it's like, ha, that was funny. Myles Garrett gets even more.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's money solves everything, right? The hurt feelings. I'm not trying to do, Cleveland to Canton, all this stuff. I've been covering the league since like 2001. And this has never changed. It's never changed. The two things that have always resolved issues in a player's mind and in the locker room are winning, makes everything better. We've heard it. The cliche is absolutely true. And money. You throw money at a problem, and more often than not, I'm not going to say it's 100%, but more often than not, a player's attitude will change really quickly. But yeah, look, there's no doubt, Max Crosby, 36 million plus AAV, Myles Garrett, 40 million plus AAV. We talked about Micah Parsons. He's a big winner here because we know he's lining up that deal. But look, quietly, Aiden Hutchinson, I mean, he didn't play out the season for the Lions. It was a huge loss for them. There's no doubt. I think he still led them in sacks. And what did he only play 7 games? I want to say. I'm sorry if I got that number wrong. But again, a guy who is lost for the season before the midway point and still leads them in sacks throughout the year. If you're Aiden Hutchinson, you're sitting there going, okay, well, I'm set because I'm also in an organization in the Lions. They don't do the Cowboys thing. They don't wait forever to get deals done. Instead, they go, let's get it done right away. Let's go ahead and as soon as we have a possibility of doing the big deal for players that we feel like are linchpins, we're going to jump on that. I expect the Lions after the 2025 season will move to pay Aiden Hutchinson rather than sitting there and watching the market go up. Barring, let's see what he looks like, obviously, in 2025 coming off that injury. But I think part of, you hear Detroit right now, and you have all these fans that are like, the general manager, Brad Holmes. What is Brad Holmes doing? There's all these memes of like, wake up, Brad Holmes. Is Brad Holmes tied to a chair in the closet? Why aren't they spending more money? We only signed DJ Reed, which is pretty damn good signing, by the way.
Amazing,
selectively great signing. But part of this is you better understand they're tactically positioning themselves because they already pay a bunch of guys. They already have a ton of guys who are making money. They're going to have to pay Jahmyr Gibbs at some point. They're going to have to pay Aiden Hutchinson. So part of their stance right now in this offseason is knowing if we have money, we can roll that into next year and it will make our lives easier, keeping Aiden Hutchinson, keeping Jahmyr Gibbs, who may next year he may rise to a Saquon Barkley level type of player for them next season. That's possible. And so I think, Aiden Hutchinson is one of those guys that when you look at the Garrett and the Crosby deals has to be really, really excited knowing he's with a team that will dole that out as soon as they have the possibility to do it.
Yeah, not just the high-end guys either. But by the way, it was funny sitting at Radio Row Super Bowl week when the Myles Garrett stuff was brewing. We got to talk about it, right? But I remember sitting 2 seats away from you, and you were basically like, yeah, whatever. They're going to pay him, and he'll be fine. And I just kept playing that through my head when I saw Myles Garrett's contract numbers come through. Like, yeah, Charles was right. Of course, he's not getting traded. This is always ridiculous. But it's not just the high-end guys that have benefited from this boom at pass rusher. It's I don't even know if I call them mid-tier guys. There are a lot of guys who signed this week who you're like, really? Yeah. Chase Young is making $51 million now? Wow.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Okay. And there's some dudes who, 12 sacks in their career and they're getting paid like they're dudes. And I get it. You pay out potential, but a lot of pass rushers got paid this week. That train ain't slowing down. Even if you have a whiff of potential or production in your NFL career, you could have a ton of injury issues like a Chase Young, a Joey Bosa, whatever. If you're a pass rusher and you have a warm body, you are getting paid in this market. Yeah.
And by the way, you mentioned, being at the Super Bowl, I interviewed Max. You guys should check that out on YouTube if you haven't seen all our interviews from the Super Bowl week. And when I asked him about the contract stuff, the first thing he said is he's like, well, I love Vegas, but we're going to find out in the next few weeks exactly how much Vegas loves me. And I just walked away from that saying, yep, no guaranteed money left on the deal. He's just at some point, players are looking for, if at the end of the day, the economics are such that when you can accomplish that level of generational wealth, I'm never going to fault a player for going for it. But Frank, your point's an important one. It raises the bar for the entire position group. Like at this point, you better hope your favorite team starts drafting and hitting on edge rushers in the draft, because it's just like quarterback. You got to get guys on rookie deals.
And it's funny too. I was thinking about this. It's an aside from the defensive end conversation, but when Andrew Berry came out at the combine and he was talking about Travis Hunter, and he said, we view him as a wide receiver. I said on this show, and I've said in other spaces, well, I guess they're not taking him at number 2. Now I'm kind of and this is, it sort of bleeds into the defensive end conversation, the edge rushing conversation. I thought in my mind, can we really say that anymore about wide receivers? Because if you feel like this is an elite level wide receiver, with what elite level wide receivers get paid nowadays, you can take them at number 2, because you need them on a cheap contract, because you don't want to pay them $35 million.
Making $12 million a year. I mean, come on.
Which means to me, and this is how I would connect it to that edge rusher conversation. You start to take guys that are not necessarily elite edge rushers, they start crawling up draft boards, because you go, look, even if he's good, maybe now he's worth a mid-first round pick. Maybe if he's a borderline 7 to 9 sack guy, with what they get paid nowadays, we want that guy on a 5-year contract. We want that's cheap, because we're going to have to end up. So you start to make adjustments, I think, to your draft board, where these blowout positions, you'll take a lesser talent at the position higher in the draft, because even the second tier guys get paid a ton of money, whereas you can see elite level talent, and I think we'll see it with the running back group again. Even though Saquon got paid, and the running back revitalization, we can let's put a pin in it, because it's taken a little bit of a left turn this offseason because there's a strong draft class. I still think you're going to see good running backs. You'll wait on those guys, whereas you'll push mid-level defensive ends up your board, because I can replace good running backs. I can pay good running backs a little less money. Mid-tier defensive ends, maybe they're not as easy to replace, and they definitely now get paid. So we have to weigh that in our value assessment. It's a great point that the second tier guys crawling up in money too starts to affect how teams build, especially in that first round where you want 5 years of a rookie deal.
And let's just keep hammering the point home, with the way the Cowboys have done business. But even look at what happened with Josh Allen. The Bills and Josh Allen, like every time you get the chance to rip that deal up, you might as well do it. Because if you can rip the deal up, you know that you're going to get ahead of the market. Every few years, he can reset the market. So I'd rather reset the market today and be ahead of the market in 4 years if I have the money right now. It's just, with the way the salary cap's going, reward your own. Okay, Frank, you've also got the Rams as a free agent winner, and I think this has a lot to do with one particular wide receiver. And I'll give Jory a lot of credit here. I didn't really remember how good Devontae was with the Jets until Jory mentioned the numbers. And I went back and rewatched a bunch of Jets games because I'm a glutton for punishment. I think I'm the first to admit I got so caught up in the Jets suck and we shouldn't be paying attention to them. I didn't really pay attention to how well Devontae played down the stretch. Rewatch some of that, man. Like, Devontae's going to make an immediate, huge impact for the Rams.
Absolutely. I mean, think of where we were at the Rams a month ago. Maybe not even a month ago. We're like, Stafford gone? Are they going to have to rebuild this? Are they going to have to do that? They get Stafford back. Look, Cooper Kupp has been a great, great player. His 2021 season, one of the great seasons of any player, any position all time, right? But I think everybody would have to admit Davante Adams right now is a huge upgrade over Cooper Kupp. And so I like what the Rams are doing. They brought back Alaric Jackson, their left tackle. Like, everything they've done has been pretty good. They still have some issues, cornerback, linebacker, which they don't value very much, but whatever. They still have some issues, but look at the rest of the division. And over at BetMGM, like, the 49ers are favored to win the NFC West, and I don't see how right now. They didn't win the NFC West last year. The Rams did. And I think the 49ers have taken a pretty big step back. Like, they haven't done anything this offseason because they're waiting to pay Purdy, and they got all these other guys on the docket. And I just don't think the 49ers are any better than they were last year when they finished last place. And I get a lot of injuries involved with that. But I think the Rams have kind of separated themselves from the NFC West, to be honest with you. I don't think the Seahawks are better without DK Metcalf. Maybe Sam Darnold's a huge upgrade over Geno Smith, but I don't think we can sit here and say that for sure. So I view the Rams as being a Super Bowl contender right now, not just a division contender. I think the Rams are legitimately, let's not forget, they almost beat Philly in Philly. Like, they're pretty darn close. They put a scare into that team. And I think the Rams are better than they were last year. And the rest of the NFC West is worse. So, or at least par at best with the Seahawks. And I don't think the Cardinals are there yet. So really like where the Rams are right now.
I also don't think the Rams are done either. You know, I think they bring back Tutu Atwell, right, on a 1-year deal. All that did with me, I sit there and I look at it and I'm like, okay, you have Puka, clearly wide receiver 1. He's going to make an argument to be in the top, 1, 2, 3 wide receivers in the league. But when you bring in Devontae Adams, right, who's got the age on him, but I do believe, I'm with you, he's got tread on the tires. I think he has more tread on the tires than Cooper at this stage. Their games are not really one-for-one styles. I actually like how he fits with Puka. And then you bring Tutu Atwell back on a 1-year deal. So what that tells me is they're probably going to address wide receiver again, probably in the draft at some point. Maybe early in the draft. I don't think they're done adding to that offense. So, but they give themselves flexibility, right? They had a great defensive draft in 2024. Now the table is set in terms of those draft picks. They can just go in any direction they want. They don't have to pour it all into one side of the football. They don't have to pour it all into, let's make sure we add everything around Matt Stafford to maximize this window we have with him. You can selectively now snipe all kinds of positions across that roster. The San Francisco 49ers attrition is real. I think it's more real than people want to believe. They lost a number of really good players. Dre Greenlaw, 100% is a guy they did not want to see go out the door, and he does. The Brock Purdy extension is not done. How they spend their money has become a huge storyline in San Francisco right now, because it's like, is ownership rotating into a more frugal mindset? We're not just going to blow salaries out anymore. We're pissed about the Brandon Ayuk deal, sort of the way that unfolded. And by the way, who knows what Ayuk is going to look like coming off of the injury last year. So yeah, I'd say the same thing. The Rams are the winners right now in the NFC West. Stafford coming back and even making the comment that maybe he sees himself playing beyond 2025, which I think the Rams will be okay with that. They're like, look, we're adding pieces. As long as we can keep you going at a high level, this is more than a just 1-year window shot. It's looking really, really good, I think, for the Rams.
I absolutely love any team that uses free agency to give themselves flexibility in the draft. That's the thing I keep saying. Like, if you reach the draft and you are not pinned in to take any one position, any one player, you have such a different approach to the entire thing. So it makes a ton of sense, C-Rob, the way you lay that out. All right, from winners to losers. I mentioned the Lions earlier, is all they got to do is get healthy. But Frank, you've still got the Lions as a loser in free agency. Give me your thoughts.
It's less about what the Lions have done, because I don't have any problem with the Brad Holmes thing. And Charles, I've seen that on social media too. Lions fans freaking out about, what are we doing? Well, you got DJ Reed, a really good player, at a contract that's much less than the other top cornerbacks on the market.
I know they're freaking out about the rest of the division. Right?
That's it. That's why I have the Lions as a loser, because you look at the rest of the division, they play in the toughest division in the NFL. They might have already played in the toughest division in the NFL, but the Bears obviously got better. You can't tell me the Bears didn't get better. The Vikings have, look, a lot of this is on JJ McCarthy, and I guess, who knows, maybe Aaron Rodgers. I don't even want to talk about that right now. But if JJ McCarthy is good, competent quarterback, they've added a lot of pieces around him. And that's a team that started last season 14-2. The Packers had the youngest roster in the NFL last year. We've forgotten about the Packers a little bit. They added to their offensive line with Aaron Banks. So you're the Lions, and you're kind of par, and that's fine. You went 15-2 last year. You shouldn't be freaking out. You're going to get healthier. You already had a loaded roster, but you're kind of here, right? You're just staying at the same place where the rest of the division is coming at you. In what world, by the way, are the Lions the hunted all of a sudden, right? Like, everybody's worried about the Lions and catching the Lions, but that's where we're at. And I think the rest of the division did a great job in trying to catch them. And I'm going to say this 8 million times this offseason. do not underrate losing coordinators. It is a massive deal for teams.
Yeah.
And
huge.
there's
Yeah,
a reason Ben
That's
Johnson and Aaron Glenn were two of the top 3 names in the head coaching cycle this year, along with Mike Vrabel. Those are good coaches. Might Johnny Morton be the next Ben Johnson and just keep that train rolling? Yeah, he might, but we don't know that right now. Ben Johnson was a wizard with that offense. So I just think it's nothing the Lions have really done bad. It's just that the rest of the division has been so good.
Yeah, I think, look, Frank, that's probably the underrated part of free agency is that no one ever sticks coaches in free agency. But it is kind of part of free agency. If you lose coaches to head coaching positions, that's technically a free agent loss, especially when it's a high-end coordinator or it's not somebody you haven't cut loose. Both of those coordinators, obviously highly sought after in the in that rotation, the head coach hiring cycle. So I agree with you. When I sit there and I look at the Lions and I evaluate the rest of the division and I say, okay, every team seemed to have gotten a little bit better. And oh, by the way, one of your great coaches now is in Chicago, and you have to face him twice a year, knowing he knows your stuff. He knows your personnel. That makes Bears games a hell of a lot harder for the Detroit Lions right now. I think the pushback for the Lions would be, look at our injuries last year. We feel like we're sort of health is our draft. That's we're going to get all these guys.
We're adding
healthy.
David Hutchinson in free agency.
Yeah, we're adding a ton of guys back to our roster who are going to be healthy. And oh, by the way, we added DJ Reed, who we believe, and we'll see if this is true. Then this could be that. If you go to Lions and you ask for the pushback, tell us why your free agency actually has been successful. They'll say we added a corner who's going to help Ennis Rakestraw significantly. He's going to help Terrion Arnold significantly. Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch. We have a secondary that could be be soaked with talent. It could be great, and that's our pushback. Is we didn't need to have an onslaught of additions. We just need to add the right addition, and they feel like they've done that. We'll see. But I think the surrounding improvement in the NFC North and then those coaching losses, it puts the Lions in a tough spot. And I get that's why there's a little bit of, I don't want to say panic in the fan base, but a little bit of frustration in the fan base because they want to be part of all of these additions too. But as we've learned with the Lions, just be patient, assume they know what they're doing right now, assume the front office and the head coach understand where they're at and the pieces they need moving forward. And hey, you know what? The NFC North, it's not like it wasn't a really tough division last year. Maybe it's the toughest division in football next year. Deal with it. And iron sharpens iron. That you have an opportunity now, go out and beat teams that got better and make good on the Super Bowl that everybody thought you were going to play in last year.
The tough part about it, though, we saw this last year. The Lions had to kill themselves to get a number 1 seed. Like usually a number 1 seed's kind of cruising.
There was a reason, though. There was a reason.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying, though. You get to the playoffs and you're a little worn out, maybe. And I'm not saying that's why they lost to the Commanders. There was a lot of injury stuff involved in there. But you didn't have a breather all season. You're like, oh my God, we're 14-2. We may not even be the division champs. Like, what are we doing? So I don't think it lessens up. I think the division's even harder than it was last year.
If I want to be a beacon of light for Lions fans, according to StatMuse, they had the second most games lost by starters to injury in 2024, second most in the league. That's
I'm
the thing you're hanging
second. I really am.
Yeah.
Who was first?
Cardinals were first, by the way.
Wow.
But if I want to be a beacon of darkness, I will just remind you that Philadelphia had the 6th most. So they were still injured everywhere and won a Super Bowl. And as you guys pointed out, the loss of 2 coordinators. Let's remember a Philadelphia team that went to the Super Bowl, lost both coordinators, and then it was about to be Sirianni fired, and all of a sudden they redo those coordinators and they win a Super Bowl. So coordinators matter. So I think there's a bit of an unknown there.
What changed? Now I'm not going to compare Saquon Barkley and DJ Reed, but they went out and I'm not going to say they didn't make other additions and they didn't do extensions and all these other things, but let's be real. They went and got the guy that changed everything. And that was Saquon. That was the piece. They went out and said, that's the guy we got to get. Whatever we got to do to get him. And they were right. It completely transformed. Now, Zach Bond, there are other pieces that showed up and played really well for them as well. And that makes a big difference, particularly defensively, because you can argue they won that Super Bowl defensively. But I do think the Lions look at the addition they made in free agency, the splash they made, and they said, we picked one guy. We know that's the one guy that's going to make the biggest difference for us defensively. And if that's true, maybe the Lions go 13-4 next year. Maybe they go 12-5. They could be a better 12-5 team if they're healthy than they were 15-2 and not healthy.
Yeah,
but then you might have to go on. You might have to go on the road in Philly to into the NFC Championship game.
The rules.
This is tough.
Welcome to the NFL. That's how it goes.
Again, tip of the cap to what might be one of the greatest off seasons we've ever seen last year from Philadelphia between the draft and free agency.
Bryce Huff, too. Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff was their big signing. Yeah, nobody remembers this. Okay, go on. That's fine.
You've also got C.J. Stroud as a loser. Frank, what do you not like for Houston?
I just don't like, we look at all these other teams with these young quarterbacks. We just talked about the Bears, what they're doing for Caleb. We talked about the Vikings, what they're doing for J.J. McCarthy. The Patriots added Morgan Moses. And, you go through the list. Every team with a young quarterback is kind of added. The Broncos added Evan Ingram for Bo Nix and on and on and on. Meanwhile, Houston is like, whatever. We'll figure out this line at some point. And Houston fans like, well, Tunsil wasn't that great. And the Shaq Mason wasn't that great. What are you talking about? We needed to get rid of those guys. Cool, you got rid of them. That's awesome. Who did you get to replace him? Ed Ingram, who was, I think, the 4th lowest graded guard at Pro Football Focus last year. I just don't think the Houston Texans are setting up C.J. Stroud to succeed right now. And it scares me because I do still believe fully in C.J. Stroud as being an MVP level player during his career. But he dipped a little bit last year. He had more dropbacks under pressure than any other quarterback in the NFL. And your line isn't better than it was. Say what you want about Tunsil, say what you want about Mason, definitely say what you want about Kenyon Green, but these guys are at least solid professionals. At very least, you haven't replaced them. And I just worry this line is going to be so bad that you're stunting C.J. Stroud's development. Now, look, a long way to go this offseason. Months and months. We might get to the end of the race in August. I'm like, okay, they figure out the line. That line should be competent. But right now, as I sit here, I'm kind of scared for C.J. Stroud. I don't think that line is even remotely at a level where you can protect a top-end quarterback.
I would say the loser, the reason why they are in the loser column is just because you lack answers, right? You just don't know now.
Right. And things can change. I just want to make that clear. Things can change. Yeah. Okay, you did this. Cool. Okay.
Texans fans were right in terms of the production aspect of Laramie Tunsil and Kenyon Green. The left side of their offensive line was just an atrocious problem. Okay.
Disaster.
Remember, that's not the only flux that's sort of occurred this offseason. Bobby Slowick is out. Nick Caley, the offensive coordinator they bring in Nick Caley from the Los Angeles Rams as offensive coordinator. They can Slowick, all the line changes. I think you could argue from a wide receiver standpoint, it still feels pretty uncertain because, Tank Dell, the injury, what's his career going to look like going forward? Stephon Diggs, obviously, that unfortunately didn't work out for them last year. So from a surrounding pieces standpoint and the line in front of Stroud, it's just all those questions that make you really nervous. My response to that would be, and I think the Texans' response would be, we had problems. We could not, the status quo was not going to work. We had to shake it up. We had to rip some pieces out. The house used to be beautiful inside. Then things went wrong. A toilet burst on the second floor.
The toaster caught on fire.
So we had to start ripping out some load-bearing walls and reshaping how we're approaching this. But it's the questions that make you really nervous, and it's the uncertainty, obviously, that makes you really nervous moving forward. And I would agree that's what puts them in the loser end of the column. I'll say this, though. It seems like, for the most part, every time somebody goes and gets somebody off the offensive staff of the Rams and brings them in, and this happened in quite a few places across the league, it seems like things tend to get better. I'm curious to see, is part of the magic wand here in the NFL just go get whoever
somebody who knows
Sean McVay's top assistant is, go get that guy and add him to your staff.
Not wrong.
Remember a few years ago we were joking that if you'd ever had a cup of coffee with Sean McVay, you were going to get a job somewhere. Thing is, it's worked. So keep having coffee with Sean McVay. That's the real takeaway.
You did it good with Sean McVay. You're set for life. Yes.
There we go. All right. What does all this mean for the draft? We'll break that down after a quick break. So what's it all mean for the draft? As we joke on the show twice a week, that we're going to do a draft live stream, and we're just going to keep willing it into existence. So C-Rob, if you weren't watching last year, you should have, because C-Rob was tipping picks like 3 picks early. It was really a delight. So it always has me thinking, what's this mean right now for the draft? And we've seen some big moves. So let's start with the Steelers, C-Rob, because we're still trying to figure out who the quarterback's going to be, but we also know that the Steelers have made some moves here. So what does all of this mean for their draft approach?
Well, okay, I think one of the things with the Steelers, and I talked about this earlier, is, I think they would really like to be able to solidify the run game, right? And, Jaylen Warren's going to be back next season. Lose Najee Harris, who leaves in free agency to the Chargers. They bring in Kenneth Gainwell, but there wasn't really I don't think it was addressed in a manner to me where I look at the Steelers' first round pick and say, that's absolutely not going to be running back. And I'm just telling you, I get this feel. I brought up Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State in the past, and kind of stuck him there in that first round. And I've talked about how there's a Steelers match there, whether it's Judkins or not. I think we have a running back draft that maybe gets triggered a little earlier than people think. And I do feel like the Steelers have some strong interest in this running back class. They lack a second round pick now because you traded it for DK Metcalf. I don't know if you can wait on this class, especially if the run starts early. So, when I look at that first round pick for the Steelers, I'm just telling you, I think there's a chance that, and it would still probably feel like a surprise on day one of the draft, depending who's sitting there. I still think there's a chance that they add to the running back position in that first round, hoping to go and get a really, really dynamic player. And, and not just the Steelers, by the way, there are other teams in the first round where you sit there and you go, I expected them to pursue, if I'm the Jets, let me see how you address the tight end position. They went and got Stone Smart out of, from the Los Angeles Chargers, who, if you watch him play, he's fun to watch. He's got this level of athleticism to him, the build, he's big, he moves really well, but they signed him to a 1-year deal. And Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, that everyone is sitting there going, this is a dynamic piece you can add to your offense who's going to be able to do a ton of different things. I'm staring at the Jets and I'm saying, okay, that is that the piece that ultimately, remember, because you bring in Justin Fields, who gives you some flexibility to do some different things offensively. You go and you get a tight end who ran the ball, threw the ball, caught the ball. He kicked the ball at one point for Penn State. There's a dynamic aspect of that tight end. And I think of Aaron Glenn also coming from the Lions and seeing that first year production out of Sam Laporta as a rookie. Now, Laporta was banged up as in his second year in 2024. So that tamped down some of the production early. But Laporta was such a huge piece as a rookie and such a great mismatch piece in 2023 for the Lions. I wonder if the Jets aren't still sitting there going, okay, yeah, we kind of addressed the tight end position, but not really. Here's this dynamic piece we can now plug in the middle of the offense that can do a lot of different things with a quarterback who can now do different things. Let's jump forward and add another tight end piece in the draft.
They passed on Brock Powers, and it was so obvious. I get Fashanu is a good player, but man, they might regret that. They really might regret that.
A few teams, Frank, let's be honest, a couple of teams passed up. No, and Brock Bowers, I'm not going to sit here and say, how could you have known? Because of course you knew. You watched him at Georgia, like, oh my God, this guy's unbelievable.
Twice. Yeah,
absolutely. He became, but let's say this about Bowers. He absolutely hit his ceiling. That's 100%. He hit his ceiling all the way.
Never for a tight end.
Yeah, but I did have a draft guy that I trust last week say that Bowers directly will impact the way that Tyler Warren is viewed in this year's draft, because people are going to look at it and say, well, look at what happened with Brock.
Not the same kind of player, though, to be honest. At all. Let's be real.
Not at all.
But Warren does have some of that Bowers versatility where you can hand the ball off to him. He's big framed. Like it's just what can you do with the pick that adds to, you can go and get a defensive player who does one or two things. You can go get an offensive player who does one or two things. Warren legitimately does 4 things for you, right? He can carry it. He can block. He's a short yardage monster. Really He is. He's a really, really good player. And I've been staring at the Jets going, let me see what they do at tight end. And when they made the Stone Smart move, and I like Stone Smart actually as a player, I was like, that's not the big splash that really resolves it.
Real quick, Charles, I want to ask you something because I want to go back to running back real quick. You think that running backs are going to get pushed up, and I understand why. I wonder if there's so many running backs in this class. The one good thing about this class is there are 8 to 10 starting caliber running backs. So let's frame it like the Steelers. You're looking at Judkins first round, but you say, well, if we wait, second round, we might get the kid from Iowa, and they're not that different. I wonder if the running backs are going to get pushed down because of that, but you think they're going to get pushed up. But do you think there's a chance that maybe just teams are like, okay, there's 10 good options we like here. We don't need to take number 2. We could take number 8 and feel really good about it.
I think what it depends on is I think it's 2 things. I think does Genty go 6 to the Raiders, right? And everybody who knows Chip Kelly in the NFL, who's ever coached with Chip Kelly, players who have played with Chip Kelly, they all think, oh my God, if you take that guy and you give him to Chip Kelly in Vegas, that kid is going to be an absolute monster. Chip would love to figure out the multitude of ways to use him. Travion Henderson out of Ohio State is also a player that I think Chip Kelly really has an affinity for, that he feels like he could maximize that ceiling on the NFL level too. So the question becomes, do the Raiders think they could get Travion later? So you don't spend the 6th overall pick on Ashton Genty out of Boise State. I think if Genty comes off at 6, I think the next thing that has to happen is another team out there has to go, okay, like we really, in terms of top end, maybe there are a lot of starters, but in terms of top end guys that we think can star, if it's Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina, let's say there's a surprise that happens in the top 15 picks and Hampton comes off. Sort of like when Jahmyr Gibbs got drafted by the Detroit Lions and people were like, oh, what? Okay, wait a minute. I think if that happens, if you get a couple of running backs that come off early, let's say in the top 15, 16 picks, which would be wildly unexpected, then all of a sudden I think everybody panics. I really do. I think at that stage, people start to panic and they go, okay, we do know that it's a deep class, but we would like to get our guy. And then you start to see an onslaught of running backs that all jam up into the first 50 picks in the draft. And when I say an onslaught, I'm talking 5-6 running backs go off in the top 50 to 55 picks.
Whew, that'd be awesome.
That's a
that'd
lot.
Be fun.
Yeah. That's a lot for the NFL.
That's really viable because, to your point, in this scenario, if the Raiders go Genty at 6, and I would beg anyone that hasn't watched college football, go back and watch Chip Kelly's offense with Ohio State last year. He loves to run the football. Like, they're going to get a running back somewhere. So if Genty goes off at 6, well, the Cowboys are still sitting there at 12 with a need at that position that is fairly glaring, right? So Hampton goes off at 12. All of a sudden, 2 running backs in the top 12. As absurd as that sounds when I say it out loud, I think, Rob, I think there's a pretty viable path to that. So now all of a sudden you are looking at it and saying,
there's a chance.
Yeah,
I think there's a chance.
Yeah.
Fitz, would you be happy with Genty at 6 to the Raiders?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Look, I think this is the truth on, like I've said a million times, great running backs to me are toppings on ice cream. And so if you want to win a Super Bowl, you have great ice cream and you put fantastic toppings on it, it makes a huge difference. So I can see why it feels like it's not a great value at this spot where the Raiders are as an organization to take Ashton Genty at 6. But I'm going to turn around and say, okay, you got a quarterback you think is going to be there for you for the next few years. You do have Brock Bowers. You have an offensive line that you think you're going to be able to improve. Yeah, at 6, take Ashton Genty and make your offense competent from day one. I mean, if you tell me this offense going into the season is Geno, Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers, I feel a lot better about that than I thought I was going to feel about the Raiders offense even a couple of months ago.
Here's the thing too. You also have to go, what's the opportunity cost? There's not a lot of great. If Travis Hunter's there at 6, then maybe that changes. Maybe you go,
what if Shedeur's there at 6? This is a real question. You got Geno, and do you believe that Geno changed anything with Shedeur for the organization?
Well, Geno doesn't have his extension yet, right? And until I see that extension, I'm going to lean into the people I talked to about Shedeur when I wrote a piece. And one of the prominent moments of making those calls and talking to different individuals was after the Geno Smith trade happened. Straight up had a long time. Look, an executive knows what they're doing. It's like, don't cross them off with Shedeur. Okay. They went and got Geno. He's like, but let's wait and see between now and the draft. Does he get his extension between now and the draft? And even if he gets his extension, what does it look like? Like, does it look to you like it's really a hammerlock? We're this is our guy. We're going to strap ourselves to him the next 3-4 years as our starter. If not, it could very easily be a Kirk Cousins situation with less money, and he said another thing. He said, wait and see. Do they still continue? They go work out Shedeur? Who shows up at the Big 12 Pro Day and watches Shedeur work out from the organization? So I wouldn't take Shedeur off of the Raiders list yet, because we don't know what other variables are in play with the Raiders.
Yeah, I'll go back to something you said last week on the show, C-Rob. I think Shedeur has a chance to be the most interesting draft story we've seen since Aaron Rodgers. And yeah, that's going to be wild. Because to your point, I could see the Raiders sticking at 6 and taking Ashton Genty. I could see the Raiders taking Shedeur Sanders. I could see the Raiders, after covering the Seahawks drafts for years, I could see them trading down and trying to get one of the running backs they like in the middle late first round. It's a wild situation, because if he's not selected at 6 or 7,
guys,
what's it mean?
Anywhere he goes is going to be fascinating. If he goes at 2 to let's say Ward comes off first, right?
Whether Shedeur Sanders, he's a big name. He's a big star already.
If the Browns select him at 2, well, it'll be a whoa moment. Whoa. Oh my gosh. And now, and it'll be like, was he overdrafted? Like, is this a force pick? All this stuff. If he goes to 6 at the Raiders, it's like, oh, wow. Okay. So this is Brady. We talk about Brady. If he goes to a surprise team, right? If he goes to, let's say he goes to the Saints.
Cowboys at 12. Come on.
There you go. Exactly. That's, oh my God, please.
For the sake of our ratings of the draft show, I need this to happen. I need it to happen. And C-Rob, I need you to give me your word today. If this happens, C-Rob, and you get it in advance, we just stop the whole, like, if somebody tips the pick to you, we stop whatever we're talking about. I don't care if it's the Raiders pick, and we just start talking about Shedeur.
That is NFL draft porn right there.
Oh my God, can you even imagine?
We're sitting here with our 70s and 80s Playboys, and Frank's like, hey, the internet.
Oh, I can't think of a better way to wrap this show up than NFL draft porn. Stone, if you don't call this episode NFL draft porn, then, we're all disappointed in you. Follow us on Twitter at Yahoo Schwab, at Charles Robinson, at Jason Fitz. Make sure you check out the Yahoo Draft Show that we're just going to keep promoting on this show every single week until the bosses tell me I can't. We'll be back next week, obviously breaking all the information down. In the meantime, Stone, Madison, everybody that works on this show, we really appreciate the time and effort they put into it. Rate, review, subscribe. You know the rules. Tell everybody how awesome the show is and share it with the buddy. It means a lot to us. We appreciate the fact that you guys take the time to listen every single episode. Have a great weekend. Enjoy it, and we're out.